Well, I think there's a general feeling that more can be done. As you know, Senator Nunn says about half the materials have been secured and the other half still need to be secured, and we have a limited period of time within which to do that before there's an incident involving nuclear radioactive materials. Nuclear security has been increasing over the years. The agency has been doing a very good job over the past 7 years. States themselves have improved their own national controls. But given the nature of the threat that exists out there, particularly new types of non-state actors who have changed the way terrorism is carried out by them. The old terrorists wanted to preserve themselves. They didn't want to kill themselves. But the new terrorists are willing to kill themselves as part of the commission of the terrorist act. So that changes the calculus dramatically. And also the fear that they might acquire nuclear radioactive materials makes this one of the most important challenges that the international community is facing today. I personally find it hard to quantify it because there are people who are giving numbers that, you know, there's so much percent chance that in the next so many years there will be an incident involving nuclear radioactive materials. I think people may well do that, but I think based on the information we have here, it is better for us to focus more on working in those regions and in those countries where for one reason or another we feel that they could enhance physical security of facilities, physical security of materials, improve their infrastructure, upgrade their border controls, and to focus on that rather than coming up with an index of, you know, so much percent chance of an incident. I think there is a political challenge. As long as the nuclear weapon states at one end are not perceived as doing sufficient commitments, so to speak, to disarm, as they've already agreed under the NPT and the outcomes in 1995 and 2000, there is the perception among many non-nuclear weapon states that the nuclear weapon states are not holding up their side of the bargain. Then when we have incidents like this flight in the US of a bomber carrying nuclear-armed cruise missiles, so where the nuclear weapon states themselves are not holding themselves up to be the examples to emulate, it makes the job that much harder. Then there is some political resistance that nuclear terrorism is not a problem for the developing countries, it's a problem more for the West or the developed countries. So there the challenge is to explain that nuclear security is only as good as the weakest link. And today's terrorists are adept enough to go and find locations or places where security might be weak and use those places to plan or commission or carry out attacks. So recognition of the threat is still an important challenge. We need to be careful. We shouldn't hype the threat too much, nor should we undersell it. Well, there is the G8 Global Partnership, which is now coming to the end of its first decade. There will be a review of it in Canada at the Huntsville Summit next year as to where the Kananaskis G8 Partnership's future lies. I think more multilateral fora are the way to go. The G8 still is a very exclusive club of the 8 most powerful countries and economies. They don't have the same legitimacy of a multilateral forum as the IAEA or the United Nations. So I'm not being critical of the G8, but it's just being realistic. G8 also smells sometimes to some countries as the big boys coming and dictating, although that's not what they actually do, but that's the perception. So one useful mechanism has been the Global Initiative to Combat Nuclear Terrorism, GCINT, where there are more than 75 countries are participating in that. It would be better if it could be opened up to even more countries to participate. So that again provides a multilateral framework where people feel that they are not only at the receiving end of information and advice, but also they can contribute. And in this field, many countries can contribute, even those that might need assistance themselves may bring some perspectives to bear that might be useful for the others. And then, of course, there is the IAEA's own nuclear security plan, which also provides another forum and mechanism. There's, of course, UN Security Council Resolution 1540, which was adopted in 2004. You will have found, and Stanley Foundation, I know, has its own project on facilitating adherence to 1540, but the level of reporting by countries about what they're doing to implement 1540 still remains not very high. The new resolution 1887 again provided political support for 1540. The way we interpret 1540 is that Security Council resolutions under Chapter 7, such as Resolution 1540, are binding on states. And therefore, it is states that have obligations under that resolution and similar resolutions to implement the provisions of those resolutions. And what international organizations like the IAEA can do is to help the states to implement their obligations. And therefore, sometimes there tends to be some confusion in the think tank and even in the diplomatic community that Resolution 1540 and the actions of Committee 1540, the committee established to implement Resolution 1540, also applies to the IAEA in terms of implementing actions to be taken by us. And we make this distinction, and we were very pleased that Resolution 1887 very clearly states that 1540 is binding upon states. States have the obligations to make sure that they are implementing the provisions of 1540, and that international and regional organizations like the IAEA, our role is to assist states so that they can implement their obligations. And many of our activities in the area of nuclear security, in the area of nuclear safety, and also our safeguards activities, all three of these pillars directly contribute to states building up their capability and capacity to implement 1540.